Hello folks. Interesting one today. Do you top or prune your pepper plants? I got asked this recently and the answer is yes, I do. But it's maybe not for the reason you guys think. Firstly then, for anyone who is new to this, has never heard this concept before, let me explain. So pruning your pepper plants, or you might hear the term topping your pepper plants, that's usually what I say. What it means is, if I grab one of my little plants here, you actually nip out the growing tip to effect a benefit to the plant. Now, normally you would do this when the plants are quite small, about maybe 4 leaves, so 2, 4. So when the little growing tip was in there, you would go in and you would just pinch it out. The idea being, and those of you who followed a lot of my videos on taking cuttings and pruning basil plants and stuff already know this, but if you take out that little growing tip, the plant then sends signals down the stem to all those little potential nodes and says, oh, you guys better grow, and that way you'll get more side stems and potentially more fruit if they fruit off those side stems. So that's why most people do this, okay? It's not why I do it, and I'll explain why. I do this because it helps keep the plants compact, so they become bushier plants. They don't get as tall. And going way back, you can see from this little clip here, before I started doing this, my pepper plants would get quite tall. Whereas these days, you've seen them, they don't get that tall at all, okay? That's why I do it. It's just to help me manage space in my greenhouse. Now, why don't I do it to help get bigger harvests then? Well, actually, it isn't that simple. It all depends on your growing season. Now, I've mentioned before, I've got quite a short growing season for these types of hot crops, okay? I grow them in a greenhouse to try and help things along, but I don't get huge amounts of perfect growing days with the perfect amount of light, the perfect amount of heat for these plants. And one of the things that happens when you prune or top your plants is it can delay those first harvests from starting and therefore delay that fruiting season. So if you've got a long season, yes, this probably does give you lots more fruit. But for me, if it's delaying the start to producing fruit, then it's not ideal because with my shorter season, it's going to be affected, obviously. Here's a really interesting one for you. If you follow the Ripe Tomato Farm, now he did a really amazing experiment involving about, I think, between 60 and 70 plants. So it was quite a decent experiment. He found when he compared the fruit, so the peppers, from plants that had been topped to plants that hadn't, he actually found that the peppers that were produced were smaller and the walls of the fruit were thinner, had less flesh on them, on the topped plants. Almost as if in the struggle to produce so much fruit, the fruit that was produced wasn't as good quality as the plants that hadn't been topped. So it's an interesting one to think about if you were doing this because you wanted to increase production. Always good to find out as much information as you can. So, given that then, I'm doing it to control the size of my plants, not to try and increase the harvest. But I have to say, my King of the North bell peppers, I am chuffed with the harvests I get. So I'm not looking to extend them in any way. So I'm pruning above the 4 leaves because I want my plants to stay bushy. It's quite scary, isn't it? Like I say, normally you would do it before they're at this size. Actually, let's not prune this one. Let's leave them and then we'll have this one to compare and see the difference in size later on in the season. I'll put them back. And a quick update. I had to go overwintering my pepper plants for the first time ever last year. Well, last winter through to now. I did it with 4, and this is the only surviving one. I don't mind admitting it to you guys, but yeah, I killed 3 of them because the ones that were in the greenhouse, I overwatered and they actually went mouldy because obviously they were dormant and they didn't need the water and it just sat. The other little buddy to this guy who was in the house, I didn't water enough and he actually all dried up, and I only discovered it very late and managed to save this guy. So yeah, I'll take the blame for that. But yeah, 1 overwintered pepper plant. So this is one of my plants from last year that I overwintered, and it gives me a plant to start with this year. Now, I don't know if this is going to be better than the other plants, not as good as the other plants. It may turn out that there was no point in me doing this at all. It was all an experiment, and we'll see how it goes. So 2 pepper experiments for this year then. The overwintered pepper from last year, how will it fare? And topping or not topping, what's going to be the difference? You'll just have to check back throughout the season and we'll do updates. So what about you guys then? Do you already prune your pepper plants, or is it something you're thinking about? And if you already prune them, what kind of results do you get, and where are you in the world? Do you have the optimum growing season for these types of plants? It's always interesting. So you know how this works. If you want to see the video where I overwintered my peppers, it's there. And if you want to just see how awesome my harvests were last year, here's a little snippet for you there. See you next time, guys. See ya.